Brian Sparks is an executive communication coach and head of communications for Bay Angels, a startup ecosystem in Silicon Valley. As top communications coach, Brian works with corporate leaders, startups, and accelerators, HR departments, and clients from all over the world who are preparing for high-stakes conversations by helping them develop their message portfolio and message delivery skills. He is an experienced business consultant with a demonstrated history of working in the higher education industry. He is passionate about building community and pairing startups with the resources, funding, education, and social capital necessary to launch, scale, and sustain their businesses. He's a certified ACC and ICF executive coach, skilled in emotional intelligence, sales, leadership, team building, and communication. And you can catch him hosting the Presentation Gym with Heroic Voice Academy every Thursday on LinkedIn Live, helping companies fine-tune their pitch deck. Just recently, he launched his new podcast, Silicon Valley Impact, where he speaks to global leaders and startups who are making an impact in the world. I am so excited to have you on the DealQuest podcast. Welcome, Brian.
Corey, thanks for having me, man. You and I in that green room were really geeking out on these topics, so I'm excited to be here and get this to your audience.
Yeah, I am. It's funny. Not that we will do this, but I feel like there was some gold in there that we should just record and release separately. So, folks, listen. I am, as you all know, any regular listeners know, we have people on who touch deals and all types of deals in various aspects. And I love what we're going to talk about with Brian here. It's an angle that maybe we touched on, but I don't think we've gotten into the depth we're going to get in here by any means. But Brian, before we get to all that and, who you work with and how you help folks and how it affects deals, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is an executive communication coach and owner of several businesses in this area. And, probably wasn't it when you were that age, but you tell me.
No, not at all. I'm glad you hit me with that one. I loved baseball. I wanted to be a baseball player. My dad was big into sports. All my friends around me were big into sports. So I grew up watching Cal Ripken play. His first year in baseball was my first year in Little League, and I was all about the Orioles. And it kind of just carried forward, being on teams, being a part of community, being in a great family. It really kind of transcended into where I am now. But to your question, baseball, sports, Corey.
Love it. At what point did the reality set in that you were going to be a professional baseball player?
Yeah, that was very early in my career, I think.
Like most of us.
Yeah, but my dad was in business, and I avoided that for years and didn't find myself back into the business world later. But I pushed baseball, football, and the sports world aside. I still did the weekend warrior thing, but I never got away from the team aspect of things. And I just been passionate about building culture that supports the success of the whole, the community. And so we're going to do a little dive into that today that closes deals.
No question. So that'll be the through line from the baseball dream. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? It could be something small when you're a kid, early in your career, whatever comes to mind.
Okay, I'm going to force things, but I could remember as a kid, and if you're a Gen Xer, you will all remember this if you played soccer. Do you remember the dollar candy bars that the Booster Club forced you to go out and sell house to house? I remember when I got my first box of candy bars, and my dad said, "Go and sell, son, go and sell." And I went out there and I went door to door selling the candy bars in my soccer shorts and soccer shirt, and said, I had all the stories. And I remember, coming with all the energy and talking about with strangers. I had a lot of access to people as a kid, but the door-to-door thing is where it all began to me. It was exciting.
Love it. Love it. All right. So listen, obviously we covered some of it in your bio, but before we even hone in on deals, just talk generally about, who are your clients, who do you work with, and, what are you helping with at a high level, just across the board?
So at a high level, we work with one group is our founders, startup founders, who are looking to put together messaging and communication strategies in order to get the funding they need in order to capture the market. They have a lot of responsibilities, and I truly believe that it all comes down to communication. So we help them with that.
No.
And we help executives looking to develop their leadership skills. Clearly, in Silicon Valley, where I am, a lot of smart people, however, very siloed. And in order to make the deals, make the connections, build trust, be the leader, you've got to come out of that silo, and it begins with communication. So depending on who we're working with, whether it be executives at a company who are looking to level up, or, more is being required of them, we work with them to kind of come outside their comfort zone with their communication skills and develop the trust, because they're leading the company. It's part of their brand. If they can't communicate it, then they're not going to have the trust and the leadership necessary to capture the market nowadays.
Right. So let's talk about how that fits in. I mean, you previewed it a little bit, but this conversation of community and this conversation of team and this conversation of, the elements of what it means to be on a team, right? Be able to rely upon each other and, build this alignment. How does all that play into what you do?
So we were talking about before, I'm going to dive right into this. I'm a big advocate of social capital. And when you can start to figure out ways to merge communities or merge teams and bring together diverse ideas, you're going to take your innovation to another level. And the goal is in innovation. The goal is in fresh perspectives. The goal is in finding a way to bring together these diverse ideas and then find a new whole. That's where collaboration and growth and progress is really made. I mean, sure, we have our traditions, the way we do things. There are old habits that work. We've got strategies in place. We've got systems in place. I mean, being in business, we just become on system overload. But you've got to counter that and balance that with innovation. And that happens with communication. I mean, not communication, but with community. Yeah. And so the more communities that you have and bring together, your social capital grows. And with social capital, ultimately comes much more.
So give us some examples of, if you have any specific, you can use names, not use names, depending on what you're comfortable with, but, give us some examples of communities coming together.
Well, I got a fresh one for you, if you bear with me. My new podcast, Silicon Valley Impact, brand new. I have multiple communities. I work with Bay Angels. We've got a huge network in Silicon Valley and throughout the world. So I'm head of communications for them. And then also I work with, but I'm a partner with Heroic Voice Academy. We work with plug and play and a lot of startup accelerators all over the world. So I have these disjointed communities. And so I said, okay, what can I do in order to kind of bring this together into a mega community? So I started Silicon Valley Impact. So I take the leaders from Bay Angels and I take this from the startup world, and I have, an innovative idea come on the show. And what I then do is I then look for unique other organizations to partner with. So for example, I partnered with The Fourth Floor, which is a women's organization that helps women prepare for board seats, executive roles, and get funding for their company, and have brought them in. So now we have this high energy startup world of angel investors, innovators from all over the world doing startup, and women who are just hungry to get in the game. And you bring these entities together and it's fire. The feedback that we've gotten just over the last couple of months is contagious. And now it just burns. And from that, you get more ideas. More people are attracted to that. And I'm excited to see what comes. And you can't control this. You really can't. It's like you bring together these communities. But what I know for sure, it serves this one fundamental need, whether you're in a company, you're on a baseball team, you're in a family, or whatever you're doing, it serves the sense of belonging that people are hungry for. And when you give them that, much more will follow once again.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I want to talk about the steps, because obviously there's so many benefits that come from putting communities together like this, right? And this is a deals podcast. So one of the things we want to talk about is how this kind of stuff leads to, for people to do deals, while recognizing that that's not the only benefit. And, actually pre-show, we were talking and I mentioned my experience in the EO community, Entrepreneurs Organization, which a lot of my listeners know I've been active in for a long time. And, it's a non-solicitation organization where you're not supposed to be asking for business, and you don't, right? It's a peer-to-peer learning organization where you support each other to be successful. But a lot of business gets done amongst people in that group, because I can't ask you to business, but if we build a relationship and you ask me to do something for you, I can say yes. I just can't solicit it. But there are steps that happen, like I don't join EO and suddenly, people are throwing me deals, right? That's not the way it works. So, what are some of the steps that happen in those communities that lead to many, many, many benefits, including, the possibility of deals? And I know you played a role in some aspects of that.
Yeah, so I'll give you three things. I'll give you a high level word that we're all familiar with, and then I'll give you three things that you can do in order to kind of start moving in that direction. The number one thing that you can do in order to start moving this direction and to bring communities together is have a sense of empathy. And you can do that in three ways. So, for example, in the group that you're talking about, you have a shared vision.
Sure.
Like many of you have an understanding of where you're going, and there may be a lot of diverse ways of looking things, but still the respect of where you are all going is prevalent in the room. So that's number one, like shared vision. And how do you articulate that vision? So the ability to talk about what your mission is, where you're going with your company, how you're serving people, what is your global goal? It has nothing to do with money, but what are your higher calling? And to be able to articulate that vision is number one. The second thing, and this is where a lot of actual deals are done, is on shared values. So the second thing is values. So let me give you an example. This is such a basic example. I think you and I, Corey, could agree that a huge value for us is not only community, but family.
Sure.
But I'm not going to sit here and argue with you, or articulate to you the details, maybe over, a meal or something. We could talk about our families and stuff, but I'm not going to tell you, well, family looks like this and it's my family. I'm going to let you insert your own vision of your family and honor that. So, but there's still that overlap of values. And so in a community, you have overlap of values. The third thing is, what are you collectively committed to? What is your vow? Like, what can I count on you for? So for example, your podcast, Corey, and you, is I can count on you to put out great, authentic information about closing deals. Like the authentic viewpoints that you provide are rich, and I can count on you for that. Yep. And so when you have shared vision, when you have shared values, and I know what I can count on for you, that is the beginning point of deals moving forward, building trust. And we haven't even begun to start talking about monetizing anything. We have a relationship. And so that would be my high level 1, 2, 3 step in terms of creating that.
Love that. So let's talk, a lot of times in this podcast, I talk about mindset because I believe that we can talk about all of these techniques and tactics and skills that we learn or whatever. But if we don't, if we don't have a mindset shift, usually there's limited, progress available. And so, one of the most obvious things is sort of this, transactional mindset versus relationship mindset. And it's almost because, it's become cliche at this point. Everybody talks about building a relationship. And, it's sort of like I talk about in my negotiating book, and I've had the pleasure of spending some time with William Ury, who's the, amazing international peace negotiator and co-author of Getting to Yes, and the concept of win-win negotiating. And win-win negotiating is like a phenomenal thing. But the problem is it's become a cliche and everybody says it now, whether they mean it or not, right? Same thing with, everybody says, oh, I'm about relationships, whether they're looking for that next sale and don't care about anything beyond that or not, right? It's become a cliche. But, let's delve into the reality, right, of that. Like, what is the mindset of the people who successfully bring these communities together or leverage the bringing together of those communities in a way that is authentic, that is, that does build that trust and that relationship, and that really does lead to great results, including deal opportunities.
Yeah. I think it comes back to, again, the value piece that I mentioned. I love people, and I believe that all people are good, right? I believe people are good. I mean, we see bad behavior, right? There's those parts. When you talk to these CEOs, for example, so Heroic Voice Academy we work with John Chambers, CEO of Cisco, and he is just passionate about the way, how he communicates.
Yeah.
And you sense with leaders like John or Sherry DeVille, who we work with, who is also a CEO that we work with, they love people, and you can feel it in their passion. It's like, yeah, they're smart. They got a great company. They're intelligent. But again, this connection that they make is driven with empathy. And I'm not putting words in their mouth. This is a kind of a general assessment. They have this empathetic passion that people matter. People are good. And it's not about, my dad saying, I'm going to paraphrase this. It's not so much about having people around you or having people accept you. It's about being a friend. It's not having the friend, it's being a friend and communicating these values So, I mean, this is where I geek out and get all excited. I could stand up right now and just keep going, but I'm just passionate. I think people are cool. When I meet people like you, Corey, or my business partners who I just think are just really cool people, it moves me and I want to introduce them. It's like now I'm already thinking, as I'm sitting here talking with you, Corey, I'm thinking, oh, I got to introduce you to Anthony. I got to introduce you to Sean, Breen, Kat, all these people. It's like, I want them together because good grows into amazing things.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I love that. And you and I are so aligned, in that way. And it's why, it's funny because in our pre-conversation, we talked about this conversation of, authority marketing and how beneficial it's been to me. And at the same time, still the biggest way that I build my business, the biggest way that I have done anything, including the causes that I believe in and getting people enrolled in supporting things and whatever is, yes, maybe the things that I've done that have given me some level of profile or authority, whatever, help people make a decision. But fundamentally, where it comes down to is that, I love being with people. You have a vision, that you get alignment on, right? One of the things, I'll go back to an entrepreneurial organization example. One of the things, I was president of the New York chapter for 2 years, and, EO is a volunteer organization. And it's almost one of the most, I'm not talking about, like William Ury does international peace negotiations, all that, we're not talking about that level, but, when in a practical day-to-day level, like being a leader in a nonprofit organization where you, a business owner, is fascinating because, first of all, they're all leaders, right? In EO, you need $1 million in revenue or above to qualify. So you have all these, you have 200 some odd members in New York at the time, running companies of $1 million above. They all have employees. They're all visionaries. They all have, they're New Yorkers, by the way. They have very strong opinions, right? And then I always used to say to my board that, as a board, you have the privilege of being a leader of leaders, right? And then as president, I had the privilege of being a leader of leaders, right? And one of the things that was brilliant about that experience, and I'll tie it back to what we're talking about, is that even though I don't think it's good to lead from authority, right, or power, in any case, you can do it in your own companies, right? You can fire people if they don't do the job, right? You do have leverage over them. But in an organization like that, you have no leverage over, your board members, they say they're going to do something. They're running the companies, they're busy. All right, you can kick them off the board. Well, all right, big deal, right? It's not, so really the only way to really successfully lead is to create a compelling vision, get alignment, enroll people in it, build a community where people are excited about that vision, moving, towards the same direction. Yeah, have some accountability systems at a high level to hold them accountable to their word. And you also can't micromanage in that because it's so, for me, there's so many parallels to the way that, you build these sort of, healthy communities and what comes about, because when it comes from a place of shared alignment, when it comes from a place of joint passion, when it comes from a place, of that, as opposed to anything else, it's where I've seen not only businesses be most successful, but amazing things happen in the world by, people who come together with that kind of alignment.
All those elements that you're talking about, Corey, and you radiate this, and I'm not just kissing up to the host of your show here. When you don't micromanage, when you have aligned vision, you share values, you have a commitment, and you're humble, what naturally comes out is a high likability. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like we all can sing, but not all of us sing good, right? I am not a good singer. But there are those who are. My point being is what ultimately surface is, are you likable? And when you play with these elements and you practice them and you truly have a heart for people, it's leading with heart, right? You talk about authority. Authority can sound controlling and, a hierarchy type of thing. But I think you can still have your authority if you have the contrast. In other words, if you have that humility, if you're willing to actually empower others with it. So if you have it, like one thing that makes me really feel at ease chatting with you, Corey, is I mentioned this likability piece, is you come across as highly likable because I feel you like me, right? It's that you give it away first. And if you have authority and then you empower someone else with authority, such as in a nonprofit, there is this stickiness that happens. People want to stick around because there's a sense of, again, back to this belonging. So if you have these high level skills or you want to see them in others, give it first, be it first. And so you do that well. Great leaders do that well, is they empower people with these qualities that they naturally have themselves.
Love it. All right. So now you brought these great communities together, and the example that you gave, and we're talking at a high level where I'm sure there's other examples where you've done it. You gave a specific one. What role are you playing? I mean, obviously you mentioned the communication piece, right? And for some, the communication conversation could seem potentially, people, because listen, like in everything else, they're all different approaches and all different philosophies and all different whatever, right? And for some, the whole communication messaging piece could be something that is done with an agenda. So to achieve something and looking much more from the point of view of how does it get the audience to do something, right? And so talk to me about how your approach and what you do with people in terms of communication plays into this bigger, more aligned kind of, relationship building, trust building kind of experience we're talking about.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Oh, that's a good one. That's a workshop right there. But
there we go.
I agree with you, right? There's a problem with, again, when I tell people I love communication. People they'll ask you all the time. And I think this is a trick to actually networking. So for people who like to network and go out there, and what is it that people usually do when they network? They'll ask you, what do you do? And then it becomes a resume conversation.
Yeah.
And so where we begin as communications coach is it's not this head stuff anymore. We're tired of that. It's like, okay, that's mundane, but someone will come along. It's like business will be in black and white all day long. And then all of a sudden someone comes along and they're in color in the way that they communicate.
Yeah.
So here's the alternative. What do you do? I do this, resume, versus what do you do, Brian? And I say, Corey, I love connecting with people. I think people are naturally good, and I will surround myself with good people. You're one of those people. And so that's what I do with my life. That's what I do as a profession, is I find good people and I get really close to them. And I just happen to do that through communications coaching, right? So that's really where that begins, is if people are important, they're going to constantly want to grow. I mean, everybody wants to make more money, and that's the mass people. And we also need to make money to feed ourselves. But then you find those who are coming from a different place. It's a shift. And as a communications coach, which I love to do, executive communication coach, I help people resonate in that because, again, expansiveness, growth in a company requires this ability to see opportunity there, connection there, pain there, solution there, and then, of course, serve. Here's another buzzword, being a servant leader.
Yeah.
So there's that. And so as somebody, I am tasked with Bay Angels, just with Bay Angels, is bringing together large communities. So you have our angel community, which is close to 30 years old. We're one of the longest running angel networks in Silicon Valley. Sure. We have a huge community that we're trying to continue to grow there. We have the startup community, which you can feel very disconnected from each other, bringing them together. Then we have service providers. Then we have all these other players that go into, bringing up the startup. So there's an ecosystem. My responsibility is now to, what can I do to bring people together and show that we're effective? Essentially what I do with Bay Angels. And it's no different than what I do to coach other C-suite individuals to do with their communities. Because right now, a big problem in corporate America is recruiting and retaining talent.
Sure.
And so if you want to recruit high-level talent, retain that talent, then this development of your culture is key. And not everyone sees it yet, but they will, or they're going to experience the downturn.
Yeah, listen, two totally disparate things come to mind working in reverse order. Nowadays, I mean, one of the drivers, the bigger drivers of a lot of M&A deals, there's so many reasons to do an M&A deal, right? It could be geographical expansion. It could be market access to certain industries. It could be product, it could be just scale. It could be, but one of the biggest drivers is talent acquisition these days, right? Because it's so hard to hire, maybe you can buy the talent. The problem is if you just buy the talent, but you don't have the right communication, right, and then get them aligned when they come in, great. You bought a company, you got a lot of talented people, but then they're not happy there and they leave. So it really, even if you're doing a deal to get talent, being able to effectively communicate, a message to align folks and get them excited to be working there is absolutely crucial as well.
And that's a great one, Corey. How many companies have you seen lose their top talent and the deals that you need to make to keep that talent on, 6 months, 18 months down the road until things settle in the acquisition process? I mean, I'm sure, you buy this company, acquisition happens, but the CEO is like, no, I want to leave. And if he does, pretty much the top talent will go with them. And so making sure people stay in that space, I mean, you have your hands full with that. So you know what I'm talking about.
And going back to one of the first things you said in this last segment was very interesting to me, because I think back to when, in the beginning of my business, and we're going back a few decades, I built my business on networking. I left a big law practice in a very down economy. I didn't have a book of business. I was only 5.5, 6 years out of school. At the big firms back then, I think it's true now as well. They didn't encourage you to develop business when you were younger. They just wanted you available to them, right? I didn't come from a family that had all these great connections. So I built my business originally on networking. I was at every networking event. And, early on, I figured this out on my own. It would have been much faster if I had somebody like you. But in the beginning, I'd be, somebody would say to me, oh, what do you do? And I'd say, I'm a lawyer, I do corporate deal, whatever. The minute you say you're a lawyer in a networking event, most people's eyes are, oh, another lawyer, right, whatever. Nobody's excited to, most of the time to meet the lawyer. So what I started saying is, people would say to me, it's so similar to what you just said. People will say to me, Corey, what do you do? I say, well, let me tell you this. I am passionate about helping businesses grow, right? And I love doing that because, I work with entrepreneurs and growing companies, and not only does it, have their business goals succeed, but it also affects, where their kids can go to school and where they live and what kind of life they can have. And, and just helping people do that is exciting to me. So I'm a lawyer, and people would be like, wait a second. Like there'd be almost a disconnect there that would be beautiful, because they'd get enrolled in the passion of what I'm about. Then I tell them I'm a lawyer, and then they would hesitate for a second, because a lot of lawyers, they may be doing litigation or whatever. And then they would ask a follow-up question, which is, of course, what you want. They'd be like, yeah, how do you do that as a lawyer? Well, okay, now they're interested, I'm in. So it's exactly what you just recommended. I just sort of came to my trial and error back in the day.
Yeah. And you know what another good counterintuitive place is to build trust, Corey, is with your competition. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I was a lawyer and you were a lawyer, I specialize in one area, and I'm chatting with somebody at a network event, it is advantageous to me to say to this individual, hey, what you're talking about, Corey can help you out with. And they may know, this is a hypothetical. They may go, well, he's your competition. Why would you be introducing me to your competition? I said, well, my mind is, no, Corey and I are a community. We're in the same field. He has a specialty, I have a specialty. But what happens in that moment is when I recommend you as a fellow lawyer for something, I actually got the trust. You may get the business. Yeah, you may get the business in the moment, but I get the trust, and they'll be back. And there's so many different ways in terms of being a connector, building a community, seeing your competition, seeing others around you, reframing things that can really, and this is not manipulation. This is really back to your original question, is how do you make that shift from being, transactional minded versus, relationship minded? And that's really what this looks like. So when you are really looking to help people and you position them for success before yourself, you're going to win. And whether it's with words or recommendations, your example was with words, you positioned yourself with success, you're going to build that authority. And it does not surprise me, Corey, or where you're at today by the strategies you've used that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And to me, there's something fundamental that underlies that I also talk to people a lot. And that is, having like what is often referred to as abundance mentality, right? If you're coming from a place of scarcity, right? And I can't tell you how many people who do exactly what I do, who are corporate and deal attorneys, who are younger attorneys who have asked me for input or whatever. There was a guy who actually was in New York, and somebody said, and he was in, so EO has an accelerator program where if you're under $1 million in revenue, but above 250, they'll, there's a whole program to help you get up and grow and become EO qualified. And he was an accelerator at the time. And a couple of people said, talk to Corey. And he was like, why would Corey talk to me? He's like, I do exactly what he does, corporate deal work. We're competitors in the same city. And, like, why would he help me? And they just said, talk to Corey, And of course, I took the call. I gave him all kinds of input, whatever. And he was super appreciative. And, for me, it's a big world out there. I'm not like, I just also fundamentally believe energetically, if I'm of service, I'm giving to people, it's going to, it's going to come back tenfold as long as I'm not doing it as a quid pro quo to have that happen. I just do it because I'm passionate about helping people grow, and I'm not going to be in a scarcity place that I'm going to help this. There's a million lawyers out there, thousands of corporate lawyers. I'm going to help this one guy. It's suddenly, like it's just, so for me, that scarcity versus abundance mentality and that service mentality you talked about, and that, that sort of giving first kind of thing really plays into all this.
Yeah. And I think when you, like what you're talking about, when you're talking about recommending, hey, talk to Corey, you're recommending a competitor. A lot of people aren't, you said a lot of people, and I agree with you, aren't attracted to the word communication, right? Like, oh, well, I am a good communication. It's like back in the day when I was passionate about emotional intelligence and still am, I couldn't call it character. People would look at me and I say, I don't have a problem. Like, and then you say, well, no, emotional intelligence. They go, ooh. And I say that to say this is, when, geez, I'm losing my train of thought. I was going so many ways in creative thinking, but back to this idea of, again, continuously finding opportunities to be of service and lead with giving. Oh, the confidence piece. People don't like the words like abundance. They don't like the words about like energy, but really when you confidently say, hey, go talk to Corey, people trust confidence. People trust confidence. Or if you're someone who says, hey, no, I don't want to be around them because they're my competition. Hey, don't talk to them. I coach companies all the time. Don't position your competition as the enemy, or else you're going to be the problem.
Yeah.
It speaks to people unconsciously. And those little losses, we'll call them, right? Those little moments where you don't contribute to your cause, but you contaminate it, they pile up very quickly. And people will go, I like your idea. It makes sense, but there's just something not right for me.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to position yourself as your competition is the enemy. You want to see them as your community.
Yeah. Yeah. I so agree with that. And I get what you're saying about a lot of people don't relate to some of those words like abundance and whatever. But I do think there's a fundamental split. Like that's a big mindset shift for me when you can move out of scarcity, right?
Absolutely.
Because then generosity comes, then, all that stuff you're talking about comes. And whether people come at that from a spiritual, energetic level or just a practical, level of when you're more of service to people, they're of course going to, look out for you more. Doesn't matter what level you relate to it on. It's, it's just something that I think is a universal truth. So, so let me just ask generally, what else? I mean, you're in so many communities, whether it's obviously founders who are looking to raise capital, CEOs who are always doing, the good ones are always looking out in addition to their organic growth for deal opportunities and communication, and whether it's M&A or joint ventures or strategic alliance or licensing deals, anything that comes out of these relationships that they build. And communication is obviously key on that, right? I mean, for the same reason in some ways that you have a communication strategy around that goes out to your customers and clients for sales, that a communication strategy is needed to have people be, attracted to you who might want to do deals, right? I'll give one quick example, then I want to really get your input on it. We represent a lot of investment advisors, people in the financial services space, right? And the independent investment advisor space is a very growing space. The move is away from the wirehouses, the Merrill Lynch's, Morgan Stanley, UBS is out to independent fiduciary firms. Many of those firms are at the point where they're looking to grow. So every one of my clients says to me, I'm looking to grow. If you know anybody, like I want to recruit new advisors, so in addition to the organic growth, getting customers, clients, I want to recruit other advisors, maybe with books of business, maybe I want to do some acquisitions. And, one of the first things I say to them is, hey, that's great. Why would they come to you? Right. And in most cases, their first answer is something along the lines of, well, we really care for our clients and we're a great place to work. And, and I say to them with a smile, but somewhat directly, I say, listen, first of all, I believe that's the case, but let me ask you this. How many firms out there do you think say, whether it's true or not, are saying the same thing? Like every single one. So what distinguishes you? Like, why would somebody come to you? What is, that gets into their value proposition to these potential advisors or companies that would sell them, which is different than their value proposition to clients. I mean, there may be some overlap, and it gets into their ability to communicate that, to have somebody be interested in doing a deal with them. To, especially nowadays, there's many years in that industry, there wasn't a lot. Now there's a lot of, VC, private equity funded buyers and, sophisticated buyers who are very clear on what their model is and what their value proposition is and how do you compete with that. So talk to me a little bit, I think it's pretty obvious communications, the importance of that in terms of people who are looking to raise capital because they're pitching for money, right? And we did have last year, Brendan Kursami on an episode of DealQuest who focused on an aspect of it. Well, let's talk about, you work with all these CEOs who have these other opportunities to do other deals and, talk about the messaging piece out, to those kind of folks on how they're presenting themselves in the marketplace and, how that ties into some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Corey, you're going to push me down another rabbit hole that I love to talk about. So I get a lot of opportunities to interview VCs, chat with them, play golf with them, as the world.
Sure.
And Silicon Valley, the world over, you'll see a ton of smart ideas, good products, good services. It makes sense.
No.
But the differentiating factor of whether or not someone is going to actually invest or you're going to close a deal is, in my world, we call it founder fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is there a founder fit, or the founders, is there a founders market fit? Who are they as the driver of this vehicle to cross us, push us across the finish line? And so I think I can't tell you how many great companies missed the boat on this, where the founder isn't equipped to lead. Again, they're in a silo, they're smart, they probably created the product, but now positioning themselves to drive this high octane machine of a business to where it's potentially going to go, it oftentimes results in either the company dying, because you know the percentage of companies dying, or the VC or those who are, has money in the company taking control of it. Yeah. And that's sad, because really this is preventable if the founder immediately goes, okay, I have to shift. I can't tell you how many, professors and academia individuals who come out with a great idea and they don't shift to the CEO. It is a different shift. They're not just the founder anymore. They're actually the driver of a company. And this can be solved with communication and leadership development. Just a couple shifts. So that's where we sit. And then it expands out to the team. I can't tell you how many times I've seen pitches go this way. You have a smart individual who now has a team of like-minded individuals, which is a disaster.
Right.
It's a disaster I had. We were coaching a company who just went into plug and play, and they were looking to be acquired. That was their goal. Obviously, they're not building it out to go to market, but they're looking, and they're going to have to. So there's that dance between being acquired and showing traction.
Sure.
But they threw up their team slide, and they had 12 people. Number one, that's too many. But they were all engineers, Corey. And here's the thing. They're surrounding themselves with probably smart individuals, but they couldn't see outside their own silo. And that is the problem. And so not only is communication about how you are messaging other people or messaging the market, but it's how aware you are of yourself and how much self-leadership you have, how you communicate to yourself, how you resolve things within yourself, how you regulate, how you drive resilience, and all these components that high-level CEOs have. These first-time entrepreneurs and startups, they don't have it yet. And all it would take is a little bit of coaching or mentoring to get them over that hump. And it's founder fit.
Yeah. And I love the way you mentioned two things, and I know you play in both these areas for folks, that combination of communications and leadership training, right? Because it's, obviously you need both, right? You need the leadership skills be able to do some of the things we talked about, whether it's communicating a vision, enrolling people, right? All that stuff. And then also, you have to be able to communicate it and they get tied together. And that opportunity to work with somebody like you to, have a founder or a younger CEO, whatever it is, grow in that area is huge. All right. Before I ask you my final two questions, is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you're either, sort of seeing out there or something you're passionate about in terms of what you do or the entrepreneurial startup community or whatever it is? Anything else you want to talk about before we hit the final?
Corey, you're taking the control of your own podcast. You're putting it into my hands.
That's okay. I'll take that risk. I'm rolling the dice.
Wow. No, but I appreciate this. I mean, it can't be understated how important it is to become a better community that drives, a better communicator, that drives community to get the results that you're looking for. I thank you for this platform and this opportunity to share that, but it can't be talked about enough. I mean, the differentiator of a great company isn't necessarily always the product or the service that's being offered up. I have seen potential. Let me share. I've got to share this story. I'm going to change it because it happened just recently. I was working with this company and they were getting ready to bring a medical solution to market that has never in its form happened before. I mean, potential for unicorn here is crystal clear. And very smart team, very smart individual, had all the pedigree, had all the logos that they needed to do what they wanted to do. However, there came a moment where they were speaking with the right people, but said the wrong things because they lacked that connection. And because Silicon Valley and the business world, I mean, there's millions going after that unicorn, but it's a small world, right? It's like bad news travels at light speed.
Sure.
They had an interview and an interaction with a potential investor that is going to, and did, continue to cripple them for years.
Wow.
It ruined my week when this happened, Corey. And it was a communication issue on their part that will now potentially tank them. Hopefully, maybe at some point, the CEO will step back and give it to someone else and it can reemerge, but it's going to take a lot of time. And this is the sensitivity of communication. It's power, using the right words, using the wrong words. And it broke my heart. I mean, but I love this. I want to see more CEOs take advantage of the word power to move their community and their mission forward. And so I think that is really kind of the takeaway and the battle cry. Leaders, communicate, grow in that space, because you won't close the deals that you think you're going to close unless you beef up that skill set.
Love it. Love it. Brian, people want to learn more about you. I know we already mentioned the podcast. I'm sure they can get them on any of the podcasts, on any of the players, but where should they go to find out more about everything you have going on?
LinkedIn, Brian Sparks. It's Sparkes. It's not KS, it's KES. Find me on LinkedIn, Brian Sparks. Love to connect with you. Or you can go to brian@briansparks.com. Send me an email, brian@briansparks.com. I love connecting with you. So keep after me and let's chat.
Awesome. My final question on the podcast, Brian, is always about my highest value in life. We talked about values earlier in the podcast, which for me is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from oppression from all people in the world to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. But what does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Oh man, the second you said that word, my heart just opened up. Like, I love that word. What does it mean to me? Oh, it's an exhale. Yeah, I love that word. Thank you. I want to sit in that for a minute. So what does freedom mean to me? I think in freedom, there comes creativity, because the second I felt that, I have all these ideas and previously shut off faculty in my mind or are cut off. And now that opens up and I can think of new ideas. So freedom, geez, another rabbit hole word. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate that. Freedom. Yeah. Creativity. I love that. Love, integration, and impact.
Love it. Brian Sparks, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Corey, you're amazing. Thanks for having me.